What's up, everyone? If this is your first time joining our show, welcome to Third Shot Podcast. And if you're a repeat listener, thank you so much for your continued support and welcome back. Don't forget to subscribe or follow our show on your favorite podcast platform. And while you're there, please give us a rating. We prefer the 5 stars, maybe 4 stars, but we'll take it all. And leave us a comment. We love to see them coming through. And we got another great episode in store for you. So, Uncle Greg and Russ, we've got our glasses ready to toast to another episode of Third Shot.
Cheers.
Looks like you guys are starting the day a lot stronger than I am. I just got strong coffee. You've got definitely something stronger there.
Well, yeah, I enjoy getting the day started on the right note. So why not loosen up? Have some
Yeah, it's
fun,
the weekend.
right? Yeah,
Exactly.
it's good time. It's good time. Speaking of the weekend, what do you guys? Both of you, all three of us actually are big sports fans. Russ, you're going to Giants games. Bridgie, you're posting stuff all the time, going to pro lacrosse. You're going to the Vegas Knights. You,
Yeah, Vegas has blown up with their sports for
yeah,
sure. And we
yeah,
love to go watch all of them.
right. You're going to watch. It's like what's the favorite sport do you have to watch in person versus TV?
Mm.
All of
You
them. I think it's so much better in person than on TV.
baseball either way. Um,
Really?
for me, the difference would be so I don't like going to a football game because there's so many breaks, there's so many timeouts, there's so
Mhm.
many I don't enjoy football in person at all. I know I'm that's probably we're gonna get hate mail for that, but
No.
um on the opposite side of that, I like watching it on TV. Basketball, love it in person. It's fantastic in person. It's so much fun. Like we just went to a Warriors game a couple weeks ago. Fantastic. Watching it on TV, totally boring. I can't do it. Even
Wow!
a playoff
Wow!
game. Like I like Warriors, they're tied up in the, whatever. Like I don't care. Like I can't watch it on TV. I'll just watch it or see a recap on YouTube afterwards. So it's kind of weird. Like
That is weird because, my wife, your auntie, and I, it's like date night every time the Warriors are on TV. Like we
mhm,
will make sure that we get together and carve out time to watch the Warriors play on TV. That's our favorite sport to watch on television.
really.
Wow, and to
Yeah.
get Auntie to watch it too, I mean, she must really like it.
Like, he turns off the true crime for, 3
Nice.
hours for us to watch a
Shocking.
basketball game together. Yeah, I mean, we're both big Warriors fans, and, we were lucky enough to go to a championship game against
Mm.
LeBron when we beat LeBron one year, right? So, that was fantastic. So, we enjoy going to Warrior games in person and watching it on TV. Um, Football, because I bet on it, I love watching it on television, but for a different reason. So on television, a lot of times what I catch, unless the Raiders are playing, because I'm a huge Raiders fan and Niners fan, I will watch those games, full on through. But otherwise, I'm watching Red Zone or I'm watching the NFL
Mm,
Network just to see the scores because I want to know like how are my bets doing and how's my fantasy
right.
football doing. So I don't know. Maybe I'm weird, but that's how that's how I watch football.
Well, growing up, I always knew you to be like the sports guy because, my dad was never much of like a sports watcher, but whenever we'd have our family functions,
Yeah.
Uncle Greg was always turning on the TV for, I don't know, football, basketball, it didn't matter what it was, but he was always putting sports on TV. So I know that he loves watching it on TV in person, reading about it.
You know what? On television right now, the majority of just regular television, not like Netflix or that type of stuff, but just regular television is sports for me. That's
Mm,
what I use regular television for. And then I do my
yeah.
movies and my, series and stuff like that, usually on Netflix or Hulu or something like that.
Well, watching so many sports and loving pickleball, are you like an avid watcher of pickleball?
Yes. And it's crazy because I will find it on you like you have like on your television where you can talk into the remote and say, "Hey, look up something." And it finds it for you? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's what I do. I say, "Pickleball," and it'll find it'll find all the different venues and different events that are recorded on pickleball, and I'll watch all the pro events. Because you and I, Bridgie, play in tournaments together, sometimes I'll look up mixed doubles 3.5 at the PPA event in some tournament just to see, like, how good are they? How do I like not like I'm scouting them, but I'm, like, just trying to figure out, "Okay, are we at that level? Are we better than that level?" Yeah, I'm sick. I'll I watch pickleball a lot on television, and pretty much I would say now, I could be wrong on this, but I would say if it has been broadcasted and recorded, I have probably watched it. Pickleball.
Wow.
Yes.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was looking at my phone because I took a screenshot of this, knowing that you watch a lot of sports online. And I wanted to give you the statistic because I know you watch pickleball.
Yeah.
So there is an estimated 36.5 million pickleball players in the United States.
Okay.
Wow.
What percent of these players do you think are watching pickleball matches televised?
Hmm.
Oh, out of
That's
36
a
million?
tough one. Oh man.
Yes.
We should bring out the Jeopardy theme song for this one.
Just throw out a number,
Oh,
like, just
I
guess the
would
number, not a
say
percent.
to watch. I mean, I kinda have an idea on this. It's definitely less than 1,000,000. I would say it might even be less than 500,000 are watching
Okay.
on television. Yeah, that's my guess.
Okay, Russ, what do you think? You're a numbers guy.
yeah. I would say it's maybe like 5% or
So
2% even. It's it's
5%.
it's it's
So
below 5% of people that are watching.
Well,
okay.
both of you are correct. It's actually below
Oof,
1%, and
below 1%. Wow.
it's estimated about 491,000. And that was
Yeah.
the most popular
That was
PPA
the
tour
that was
match.
the biggest? That was the most watched was 490,000?
The most viewed
Wow.
PPA tour match on YouTube of 2023. So these stats were posted by the Dink Pickleball,
Wow.
which everyone's familiar with.
Yeah.
But that just brings up a talking point of like it's such a popular sport, but why aren't people watching it? What do you think?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do okay, so I talk into my like I said, I talk into my remote to find it. If I didn't have that feature, it's not advertised. Like, I don't
Mhm.
know when something is going to be even though I know the pro events are on weekends, right, and usually have the semis and the finals on Saturday, Sunday, it's still tough for me to find what network is covering it. Is it YouTube? Is it CBS? Where am I gonna find it? And I think, with football, the NFL, every Sunday and every Monday and now every Thursday night, you know exactly when to find it. It's destination
That's true.
television for fans, right? For pickleball, you just don't know which events are covered, which ones aren't, what network. I think that has a lot to do with it. What do you think, Russ?
I'm gonna do the whole, riches and the niches thing, of saying that, the way that broadcast and even, video consumption online has changed is it's all about niche. So I think like the huge audiences of the old days are just gone. Like I
Mhm.
think even the Super Bowl now gets less people watching than it did before. I think. I don't know. I could be totally wrong on that. But I know, like we're not watching the Tonight Show all together every night anymore. We're not watching like as a group these big like mass appeal things. And I mean, I think that's why, like this show does well because it's super niche. It's just about pickleball and, whatever silly things I'm going to say. And so I think that's why we're probably never going to see it go higher just because it's super niche. But like I said, the riches are in the niches. So it could be successful and it could like, get some, high level sponsors and whatnot, just because you've got the hardcore fans watching that. So I think that's what it's going to be. I think it'll always be a low number. I'm kind of surprised that it is as low as it is, but
Isn't it shocking though? 1%?
yeah, like
Yeah.
1%
it's
of players
really low,
actually watch on television pickleball.
right?
That's crazy low.
The other thing though is, do people even know about it? Do people even know it's there? Like you're saying, right? Like you get it on your TV, but even if people with the button that they can press to go search for pickleball, are they doing that?
Right.
Like, are they even thinking that it's there, or are they just going to watch lessons? Are they looking up lessons on pickleball, not people playing pickleball? And I mean, you do get better by watching the players, right? Like,
Right.
you see what they do and you can sort of replicate. But I think maybe people just don't even know it's there.
Well, for the people that do know it's there, this question's for Bridgie. Like Anna Lee is at the top for game. She's in every finals. Ben Johns, Colin Johns, they're usually in every men's doubles finals. Ben is in every men's singles finals. It's a very small group of people that are making it to the semis and finals each week. Do you think that's good for the sport, or do you think that's bad for the sport as far as viewing it goes?
Mhm.
That's a great question. I think that, it does kind of help to see the same names popping up because the sport is so new that you only not have to, but it's easier to start recognizing a few of the top players
Mhm.
rather than having to learn who the top like 20 are in the rotation. But then again, on the flip side, if there were, a top 20 that you knew of, there may be more competition and more intrigue to see, okay, who's going to be going. But I do think that part of the problem is that it's like having professional pickleball be on TV is so new still that people are getting used to watching it. Like it wasn't accessible to them like a few years ago. And so they have to gain that fandom behind it to where people are going to seek it out and to watch
Mhm.
it.
Yeah. I don't know. What do you think, Russ? Does having the same kind of cast of characters help or hurt watching pickleball?
Well, I feel like it would. Yeah. I mean, it's almost like, look at any sport, right? Like, you've got, well, okay, the Warriors, Steph Curry. I mean, he brings new people in, right? Like
Yeah.
people are just watching because of him.
Yeah.
Or, do that for any sport, and there's people watching because of that. And it's like, if there's some like super, like, oh my god, this person's amazing, then I think that'll bring a breakthrough in it.
Yeah, like
It's
Michael
almost like,
Jordan. I mean, he
exactly,
revolutionized, like
right,
Tiger Woods revolutionized golf, right?
exactly. The
There's
Bash
those
Brothers, I'll take
transcendent
you back.
players. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's when somebody breaks through like that and becomes more of like a pop culture icon, then it's gonna bring more people to it as well.
It's a fascinating topic, and it's going to be really interesting to see how, pro pickleball and just pickleball in general grows moving forward. And lucky for us, we have a fantastic guest to give us some insight to this because we have David Hathaway, who is a pickleball player agent. We've never had an agent on our show before, and he's the founder of Godfather Pickleball Agency. And he can kind of peel it back a little bit and tell us a little bit about what it is like on the business side of pickleball. So stay tuned and come back and meet with David. Thanks for hanging out with us and welcome back to Third Shot Podcast. We always appreciate all the support, social media. And you know what? I don't usually mention, but go to our website too, thirdshotpodcast.com. I'm wearing, for the people watching on YouTube, some of our merch. You're welcome to get some of our shirts or sweatshirts. We got hoodies, we got a whole bunch of good stuff. So please go check it out and follow us on our Instagram and Facebook at Third Shot Podcast, on X, Third Shot Pod, and you can actually see us on YouTube now. So check us out, Third Shot Podcast on YouTube. Hey, we are really excited to have David Hathaway, who is the founder of Godfather Pickleball Agency. We've never had a pickleball agent on before. We can't wait for the conversation. So, welcome, David, to the show.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you, David, for joining us today. And we'll do a little toast before we jump into the questions to our first agent on
Yeah,
Third
Cheers.
Shot Podcast.
yeah,
Cheers.
Cheers.
exciting. Cheers.
So I'm sure we've got millions of questions for you because this is such an interesting topic to us. But before we dive into it, just to kind of set the scene, get some context, can you share with us what your background was before starting Godfather Pickleball Agency?
Sure. Thanks again for having me. Um, I was an interest rate derivatives trader on Wall Street for about 20 years. The last 10 years I spent managing Sandpiper Asset Management, which was a small global macro hedge fund here in Neptune Beach, Florida, right outside of Jacksonville in the northeast corner. I semi-retired approximately 18 months ago and have a host of entrepreneurial ventures. About 4 months ago, a good friend of mine, Rafa Hewitt, gave me a call and asked me to be his agent. It was a time in pickleball with which is known as Tour Wars, and he wanted business advice, financial advice. I quickly realized he needed legal advice, so I partnered with my best friend who attended the University of Virginia with me, who has been a 20-year contract attorney. And over the weekend, we launched Godfather Pickleball, representing Rafa Hewitt to start, and quickly thereafter, Pablo Tejas. And
Wow.
over the past 3 or 4 months, we've grown over a roster of over 15 professional pickleball players, and it's been an adventure.
So
Wow,
I'm just
15.
yeah, that is amazing in a short amount of time. It just shows the need that players need for to have agents to represent them and make
Absolutely.
sure they're getting into good contracts. Before we get into that whole business side of it, I'm just curious to be a pickleball agent. Do you have to play pickleball? Do you play? Do you
I
enjoy it?
do.
Or
I do. I played tennis very briefly at the University of Virginia back in the late 90s. I picked up a pickleball paddle in 2018, and being an ex-college tennis player and a high-level tennis player, I thought I could just go down and enter the pro draw and compete at the professional level.
wow,
Um, After getting quickly defeated by Anton Goots, who remains one of the top 20 or 50 players in the world, I realized that this professional division is a little bit different. These guys actually know what they're doing. The transition from competitive tennis wasn't as easy. Launched a small business called Pickleball by Pros with Rafa and Frank Anthony Davis and a host of other pros, um, which we sold digital membership subscription lessons. Eventually,
mm-hmm.
most of the pros were giving it away for free on YouTube, so that business didn't quite pan out financially for us. But it did allow me great relationships with a lot of the pros. I became close friends with them and kind of a de facto business advisor to them on occasion. And when Tour Wars was erupting over the weekend, Rafa quickly called me up, explained the situation and the level of interest and frankly money available or being thrown around or previously available. We'll find out if it's actually going to be available at some point. Was interesting from me. The time that it takes to be an agent and a representative is a lot. There's a lot that goes in it from a digital media perspective, social media marketing perspective, obviously huge legal element that is important. And so we thought if we professionalized it into a full blown agency, that the demand would be there, and it has been. We launched at the beginning, we were mostly word of mouth as we were getting some traction and kind of getting our feet wet in the space. But when we posted or started posting our clients and some things else on our social media channel, the flood of pros DMing us was interesting, and it's obviously a need. These are
Yeah,
professional athletes, not always adept at a lot of the business opportunities the legal contracts that they're signing or not, or being presented to them. And so we just want to make sure they're professionally represented and taken care of to the best of our ability.
So, well, congratulations on getting so many people already on board with your agency in such a short amount of time.
Thank you.
What's the vetting process like, if you're able to share that, when someone reaches out, maybe, via Instagram or social media, or even maybe just a phone call? What does that vetting process look like to get them onto your team?
Sure. So we schedule a a Zoom call, an introductory call. We present ourselves, we introduce ourselves, we explain our backgrounds, we explain why we're here and how we got to this position, and then we get to know the players. And being a fan of the sport, I've probably already heard of most of them or know of them anyway, or have already been close friends with them. But we have a host of clients that run the gamut from kind of OG players who've been around the space for a long time and are still competitive, but perhaps not in the semis or quarters of every PPA event. A lot of our players signed MLP deals, which what has gone on over the last 3 or 4 months and continues to this day remains uncertain. So they're interested there. Our contract is bilateral, not unilateral. So, if it's not a fit for us or it's not a fit for them, or over any span of time, we can walk away with no strings attached. Anything that they have already currently in place, we're not charging fees on for our times or efforts. If we create value and we think we can create value for the player, then it's probably a good partnership. So I wouldn't say that I'm running background checks on any of these players, but I am a fan, and I probably am a friend of most of them anyway. So it's been exciting.
Well, I think the timing is so necessary right now for the players because of everything that's going on with the PPA saying, "Hey, you guys got these contracts. It looked fantastic. It looked like it was going to change the whole landscape for professional players and get them paid." And then that changed very quickly. If you could walk our audience through what happened, like, originally what happened with the contracts, how did they get pulled? How is it changing? What's the landscape moving forward now?
So there was a weekend where MLP and PPA were competing very heavily to purchase and secure talent for each tour individually. And unfortunately, and I make the joke, hopefully it's not at anyone's expense, but they weren't quite very attuned with the sum if function in Excel. And so when they had a budget of X, they spent 2 or 3 times X, both independently. They were excited. They understood the growth. They understood the profit potential in the long term for securing some of the top players in the game. And they were competing frankly, over a weekend to lock up some of the best pros and the best talent in the world to secure the future of their dominance as an individual asset to each organization. Unfortunately, after time went on, they started adding up the liability stream that they committed to and realized that they probably didn't make the best business decision. And from a cash flow perspective, professional pickleball still isn't a very profitable business to be in until and if they land this is just my opinion, they land a large media TV deal. Some of the finances, as with any business that's in its infancy, and professional pickleball still is not financially cash flowing positively. And so they had to secure investors. MLP, for example, has 24 teams, all of which are owned by very successful, very independently wealthy individuals who all have their own legal teams. They all have their egos. They all have their successes and viewpoints. So from that point of collaboration, you're herding a lot of cats, so to speak. And then from a PPA side, they have a very successful financial tournament division. However, the professional landscape is still being figured out from a financial viability point of view. And so the tours are attempting to merge. The date has been pushed back 2 or 3 times. so they can make good on their commitments to some of the players that they signed back in the fall of last year.
And
Wow.
then what happened? Because, we see in the news that, people lost their contracts, or, they I don't know. What's the legal
No, sir,
term?
I wouldn't say that anyone's lost their contract. These contracts have not been defaulted on. These contracts contain time periods that allow the payments to be made in a delayed fashion. So in the back of some of these contracts, there's a leniency period provided to make good on your financial obligations unless the deals are renegotiated. So, and I'm not going to get specific onto any individual contract, but let's just make up a number, whether it's 15 days, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. If you were supposed to pay a player on January 1st, you actually have 45 or 60 or 90 days to make that payment. And so from a financial standpoint, if you're a professional athlete, you're fronting all the travel expenses, everything that goes along with being a top performance athlete until those obligations are made whole.
Gotcha.
And so from
Wow,
the tour,
that's still stressful for them.
yeah. And from the tour's perspective, they're not in breach of contract. These contracts have terms, they're legally binding documents, and they allow for such a period of leniency to make those obligations. At the end of which, if they fail to make good on they're in breach of contract, and there's legal unwinds for that process to proceed.
That is a lot going on, and
Yeah,
I can
from a
imagine.
human level, it's difficult.
Yeah.
These tours' primary asset is their talent and their players. Their primary liability is also the players. So there's a balancing function. And they made some probably unfortunate decisions in the fall that they're trying to unwind and work out as we go forward.
Have you seen amongst the players that what's going on right now kind of affecting their morale or kind of, just their overall kind of
Yeah,
disposition, I
absolutely.
suppose?
Sure. I mean, the vision that sparked this increase in pay was to provide these professional athletes with the financial resources that they could truly devote 100% of their time, energy, and efforts to playing professional pickleball. And they all loved that. That was new. I won't say that's revolutionary, but in the evolution of professional pickleball, that hadn't been seen before. Most of these players have or had second jobs that kind of financed their journey, or they had large-ish sponsors arrangements to allow them to play professional pickleball. And so when they did sign these commitments, a lot of them did quit or take a reduction in their full-time jobs. And now, the strain of weekly life and travel and the expense of being a peak performance athlete is wearing on them.
And then to add to that, I believe when we were talking off air, you were saying the prize funds at the Masters tournament, for example, earlier this year, there was no prize fund. Is that the case?
There was no prize money, to the best of my knowledge, at PPA Masters. Again, I don't want to spread rumors or talk out of turn, but I know some of our athletes performed exceptionally well and made it to the quarters and the semis, and there was no prize money. And the prize money wasn't advertised, and it wasn't. I'm not saying anyone was misled by the tours, but the prize money grid, for example, that existed last year for PPA events was removed prior to the Masters. And again, as far as I know, no one was compensated for their performance at the Masters.
I mean, that just adds to the financial stress that these players, they're traveling all the way to, California to play in Masters.
Sure.
And, it's not cheap. And then even if they do well, they don't make money. I want to take a step back though. There was a prize grid obviously last year, but how high do you need to finish to actually make any money at these pro events?
So the landscape has changed a little bit with the progressive draw and the increase and influx of younger, call it unknown pickleball players who are actually really good and talented entering the qualies and the pre-qualies and then advancing to the main draw. Traditionally, you would get paid per round of the main draw an additional chunk of money depending on how far you went in a given, whether it's gender doubles, mixed doubles, or singles. But the progressive draw also has added a lot of financial difficulty because if you aren't one of the elite and you're getting placed in automatically into the main draw, you're arriving at these venues on Monday, playing Tuesday. If you achieve your dream and make it all the way to final Sunday, you're spending a week away from your family, or you're paying for your family to be there. You're spending a week away from your job if you do have another full-time job, and you're spending a week on the road, which can be very expensive.
Yeah.
So the financial math doesn't really work at all unless you have a really good sponsor who believes in you and wants their brand viewed by as many eyeballs as possible throughout that week.
But then you were also saying that a lot of players have in their sponsorship contracts, kind of percentage of winnings kind of get matched by the sponsor in some cases. Some paddle companies would do that. So in the master situation where there was no prize money, the players didn't even get the sponsorship funds, even if they advanced.
That's right. A lot of the traditional sponsorship deals that the large manufacturers have created over the years was to incentivize peak performance and get, through enough spaces in the draw, was matching or doubling or tripling, depending on who the athlete is and what the company is, prize money incentives in their contracts. And right now, through my conversations with a bunch of the major paddle manufacturers, we are all trying to collaborate and try to solve that issue.
Yeah, I was just going to ask after that, do you think there's going to be some renegotiating of sponsorship deals after all of this has happened?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you take a client that regularly finishes in the semis, but he or she is still under a deal that they signed 12 to 18 months ago, the incentives provided in those contracts and kind of counted on to facilitate that player's journey through professional pickleball is no longer really relevant. Now they're still under contract and they still have to, honor their obligations. But hopefully the athlete wants to be with the company and the company wants the athlete to be compensated and be able to perform at their best. And so we work through those issues together.
So since you're involved in a lot of these conversations with the manufacturers, and I'm sure with some officials with the different tournaments and leagues, I was like, what do you think is going to happen moving forward? Like, how is this all going to work out? Because it doesn't seem like it's sustainable the way it is right now for a couple of different reasons, right? So what do you think is going to happen?
It's certainly not sustainable today because everything is contingent on PPA and MLP coming together and merging. And I do think that will happen. In fact, prior to this podcast, I spoke with one of the leaders at MLP, and he is confident that a merger will be worked out. However, the timing remains in flux and difficult. And like I said, you have a lot of very talented, experienced, and rich people who are involved at various levels, whether they own a team or whether they're trying to fund or they're a partner with the PPA somehow. And all these people have different interests and viewpoints that have to come together to facilitate the deal to come through. I am confident that the merger will happen. I am not confident as to when. So, for example, this weekend coming up, a lot of our athletes are traveling to Phoenix to play PPA Desert Ridge, and they're financing that personally. And there's no guaranteed of prize money compensation if they do well. And like we've said, oftentimes the prize money match isn't there. My advice to most of them has been, hopefully this is a short-term issue and you're investing in your brand and you're supporting your sponsor's brand. And you have to look at this as an investment in your career, your personal brand. But yeah, it's a financial burden that's coming directly out of the players' pockets. Not only that, to be a professional athlete, unless you are a contracted player at the PPA, you have to pay to play in that event in and of itself.
Right.
And a lot of people don't realize it takes about, let's say you're a top 20 athlete, but you don't have a PPA contract. Just to enter all three divisions costs approximately $600.
Wow. And
So
that's just to enter.
That's just to enter. And then you don't really know until the week prior what your draw looks like, where you were seated, do you have to play in the qualifiers? The qualifiers are risky now, right? Because even if you've been a top 20 player for your whole career, there's a lot of young talent flooding those qualies, and those qualies are legit. You're not steamrolling through the qualies anymore.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time. It's an interesting landscape.
Yeah, really. In the pro world of pickleball, things are a little bit tense, but it's good because I mean, I think this just shows the growth of the sport, and hopefully, if things are done right now, that we can move forward and continue to grow in a better, more positive direction. What's it? Yeah, I was curious though. What is it like to be an agent, a professional pickleball sports agent? Because this can't be your day to day. Is talking about this.
I'll be frankly honest. I did not launch this to be my day to day. However, it takes a tremendous amount of time and phone calls with, whether it's a sponsorship phone call that you have calendared for 30 minutes, ends up taking an hour because you get along with the guy or the girl and it's great, or your players. And hopefully they're not listening, but maybe they are. They call you up for a quick 5 minutes that inevitably is always an hour. But it's really fun. It's interesting. So it has been time consuming. The PPA MLP chaos is unfortunately taking a tremendous amount of time. I wish I could be hunting down endorsement contracts for our players. The other interesting thing in pickleball is there's so many opportunities. There's so many new emerging brands and companies. You don't always know if you're talking to someone who does have a legit business or is frankly, private labeling and stamping logos on stuff they get internationally. The affiliate model is one that's pretty interesting in a lot of avenues in other sports. However, pickleball doesn't really have the Instagram following to make that profitable for a lot of our athletes. You could take AL or Ben, for example, and while it's impressive on one level that they have 50 or 60 or 70,000 followers, for a plunge company or for a supplement brand, they're not really even interested in you until you're 100, 200, 300.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, the affiliate / influencer world, a lot of these workout people or nutrition influencers have been at it and doing it really well for a long time. And they understand the Instagram algorithm, and they have 300, 400, 500,000 followers. So while a pickleball star is influential in the pickleball world, but you present them with 5,000 or 7,000 followers, it's not as interesting. And so driving affiliate revenue from a coupon code or a discount code that they may or may not be interested in, it doesn't really turn over to substantial money to a pickleball athlete.
I always thought, before talking to you about this, that, I would say, the top 20 pros, the people you see showing up very often in quarters, semis, finals of tournaments, both men and women, would have a pretty easy time getting sponsorships. But it doesn't sound like that's the case. It sounds like not only is it a challenge as far as, the contract goes and prize money goes, but there's not a lot of sponsorship money actually to be made either. And especially if you're below the top 20 players in the world.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. And sure, the quote unquote easy money are the major paddle manufacturers. And they have their established relationships often, and they've written their big checks already. Or so if it is time to renegotiate, sure, that's an opportunity to make quote unquote substantial money in the space. But the rest of the sponsorship and endorsement money is either flowing to the tours, because frankly, you're getting a lot more eyeballs by sponsoring a single event, and you're kind of managing the process, one and done, to get eyeballs onto your brand. Or it's convincing a brand that you shouldn't really look at the pickleball athlete by exactly how many followers they have. You're purchasing credibility and establishment to the entire pickleball landscape by a top professional representing your brand.
Yeah.
So, and credibility is a very subjective number to negotiate.
Right. But there's so many up and coming companies that do want to get their name out there and add credibility to their brand. Hopefully, they are legit and they have some longevity to them and have some money behind them that they can get to the players.
Right, and it's not impossible. I mean, we have great relationships with a host of brands and companies, and we're looking to explore, hundreds or thousands more. But a lot of that is grunt level work of reaching out on social media or reaching out via email, establishing those relationships when you're at in-person events. For example, my business partner and I were just at the PGA Expo in Orlando, and there was, the golf section was had to be miles inside the convention center, but the pickleball carve out was 10 times what it was the year before, I heard. So yes, the appetite and growth is there. It's finding and building the right relationships with the right people and aligning your interests and your athletes' interests to maximize ROI from everyone's perspective.
Yeah, I used to go to that PGA show every year. I was in the golf industry for a number of years, and I would go to that show, and it was just strictly golf. It's not like tennis had their own section. I mean,
Right.
it was all golf. But then now, and I saw your post that pickleball, they had a full on court that you got to play on. I mean, they had a whole bunch of vendors. They had. I mean, pickleball actually made a huge had a huge presence at the PGA show. And I'm like, okay, this is a really positive sign for the sport. Or it's a negative sign for golf. One of the two.
Well, you traded in your club.
Yeah, and I don't play as much golf as I used to either. Yeah, I mean, it helps to have brands that really fronted the exposure for pickleball there, like Skechers, like Pro XR, like Selkirk, who kind of negotiated or carved out a whole section for themselves and put those courts in.
Super cool.
Yeah. Well, we're seeing it more and more, we just pop up in like commercials and shows, and there's been an explosion of number of players over the years. Where do you see the sport going in the next few years to come? Because it feels like we're at like a turning point almost where something needs to happen.
So they say, and I have no way to verify or doubt this number, but 40 million people played in the United States last year. The unfortunate thing is when you pull up a live stream of a professional event, the numbers watching are still in the thousands. So for an event like ESPN is hosting next week at Hard Rock, where Agassi and Sharapova and Graf and McEnroe are playing, they're going to get millions of views. I believe it's next Wednesday. They have to somehow figure out how to make the recreational player, or at least 5 or 10% of the recreational player, care about watching the professional game. And there's a variety of creative ways that they can do that. And it will just happen naturally as well. But clearly a consistent TV exposure. Like I'm an agent and have 8 clients. And oftentimes the player's wife and myself are texting about, hey, when is this client going to be on? Is he going to be streamed? How can I watch it? We have no idea. So the average viewer, that's very frustrating. They want to watch their favorite players. They oftentimes, maybe they do, maybe they don't, want to watch the exact same players over and over again. I think MLP was really exciting when ESPN aired the finals a year and a half or a year ago. I think that really jump-started some interest and exposure to that team format. I think being local in a community, if they can secure regular venues and piggyback on a AAA baseball or minor league hockey model, would be interesting.
Yeah, that would be good.
I've said, and I've used the example that UFC in 2005 basically smashed into normal households and not just MMA households by creating a reality show called The Ultimate Fighter. And if you look at their viewership from before that show to after that show, it went up 5 or 10-fold. If you can create a way for people to really know and understand and love or hate a given personality or player, they're going to want to watch them compete. I think that's an interesting avenue too.
Yeah, I mean, the little background on us, David, is Bridgie and I were on a reality show about pickleball. About a year and a half ago now, Bridgie? It's been a while. And it was really exciting. It was a lot of fun, obviously, for us to be on it. But we thought, oh my gosh, they were shopping it around to different networks. We thought immediately this is going to be picked up because the sport was so popular and it's growing so quickly. But even with that, they had a challenge trying to find, a network or who they're going to get picked up by. Eventually they did, which is wonderful, but it took them a while. It wasn't easy for them.
Yeah, and I mean, it helps now that there's more competitive streaming platforms looking for opportunities like that. I mean, you can also use F1. F1 is crazy popular worldwide, obviously, but it really didn't resonate in America until Netflix picked up the reality F1 show, and now normal people watch car racing in the United States, or at least a lot more do.
And
I think there's an amazing opportunity.
They tear up Bridgie's home. They tear up all of Las Vegas.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that brought so much trouble.
I didn't mean to interrupt, David. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
But yeah, I totally agree with the point that you're making. I think that, it does need some type of media support on a consistent basis so that people know they can watch or, really get engaged with some of the up and coming players, right? Not just the top players. I think all of that would be very helpful for the longevity of the sport.
Agreed. But I mean, you got to the numbers, and there's an interesting article about China this morning on, what is it? One of the agency blogs. I'm blanking on but I mean, when it becomes an Olympic sport, the international exposure will explode. I mean, we all know the attractiveness of pickleball. You can go out with an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, and they can play competitively from basically day one. But playing as a professional is obviously a far more strategic, nuanced journey. But I don't see the growth slowing at all from a recreational play standpoint. And you just need a small percentage of that to watch for ad revenues to be generated from a TV exposure.
Yeah. Well, definitely exciting times in the pickleball world. And, we
Absolutely.
really appreciate you coming on and sharing all of your knowledge and the insight because, wow, I don't think, the average rec player truly knows what's going on behind scenes. So that's pretty cool that we were able to get that from you.
Well, I appreciate the time, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. It was so informative. And yeah, I'm glad we were able to share and drop some of that knowledge on our audience. And speaking of our audience, thank you so much for continuing to listen to Third Shot Podcast. We love having you on. We have our goal of making sure we have more interesting guests, just like David Hathaway. Before we let you go, David, we have to take our third shot of the
Third
show.
shot.
So please, cheers to David Hathaway, the future of professional pickleball and the Godfather Pickleball Agency. Congratulations on what you've accomplished.
Thank you so much. You guys have a great day.
You
Thank
too.
you. You too.
And our goal is we're going to keep bringing more guests just like David on in future episodes and continue to share our goal to make sure that we have a growth in this pickleball sport, whether it's professional, more likely amateur, right? Let's just keep growing it together. And please come back and share with us on Third Shot Podcast. See you later.